You handed your baby the tablet for 10 minutes while you made dinner, and now you're lying awake wondering if you just damaged their brain. Here's the thing. That guilt, it's being manufactured not by science, by accounts that have never read a single peer-reviewed study in their lives. Because the actual research on screen time and infant brain development is far more complicated and far more honest than anything you've seen in a 30-second reel. Some of it will reassure you. Some of it will genuinely surprise you. And one part of it, near the end of this video, is something almost no parenting account will say out loud because it doesn't fit the algorithm. Stay with me. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no screen time for children under 18 months, except video calls, and limited high-quality programming for children aged 2 to 5, watched together with a caregiver. You've probably seen that guideline shared 1,000 times. What almost nobody shares is where it came from and what its own authors have said about its limitations. The original 1999 AAP policy statement was issued at a moment when the research base was genuinely thin. The committee was working primarily from studies of television exposure, passive background TV, in toddlers and preschoolers. Smartphones didn't exist. Tablets didn't exist. Interactive educational apps didn't exist. The guideline was precautionary, and appropriately so, but it was never meant to be the final word. The AAP itself updated its guidance in 2016 and again softened its language in 2023, explicitly acknowledging that the quality and context of screen use matters enormously, and that a blanket prohibition doesn't reflect how families actually live. Dr. Jenny Radeski, one of the lead researchers behind the updated guidelines, has publicly stated that the goal was never to make parents feel like criminals for a video call with grandma or a few minutes of Bluey. So the next time someone shares that no screens before 2 rule, like it's carved in stone, you now know it's a living recommendation built on evolving evidence. That doesn't mean screens are harmless. It means the conversation is more sophisticated than a single number. And the research, it's more sophisticated too. Let's actually look at it. When researchers talk about screen time harming infant development, they are almost always talking about one specific thing: passive, background, solo screen exposure. This is the television running in the room while a baby plays. This is handing a phone to a 9-month-old and walking away. This is the content nobody chose, playing to nobody in particular. The evidence here is actually consistent and worth taking seriously. Studies tracking language development, including work published in JAMA Pediatrics following thousands of children longitudinally, have found associations between high background television exposure in infancy and slower vocabulary acquisition. The proposed mechanism isn't that screens emit something toxic. It's simpler and more important than that. Every minute the TV is on in the background is a minute that adult-to-child conversation is reduced. An adult-to-child conversation, the back and forth, the serve and return interaction that developmental scientists have documented for decades, is the single most powerful driver of early language development we know of. It's not the screen doing damage, it's what the screen displaces. This distinction matters enormously because it changes what you should actually worry about. A baby who watches 30 minutes of a show while a caregiver sits beside them, commenting, pointing, asking, "Did you see that?" is having a fundamentally different neurological experience than a baby parked alone in front of a screen for 3 hours while no one speaks to them. The research doesn't always make that distinction cleanly. Many early studies measured total screen time without separating passive from interactive, solo from co-viewed, background from intentional. When you collapse all of those into one variable called screen time, the results look alarming. When you disaggregate them, the picture changes. Be honest with yourself right now. When screens are on in your home, are you still talking to your baby? Still narrating? Still responding? Still present? Because that answer matters far more than the number of minutes on the screen. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've thought about this before, or a 2 if this is the first time you're really sitting with it. Here's a finding that quietly dismantles the simplest version of the screen's bad argument. Infants as young as 12 months can learn words from live video calls, but not from pre-recorded video of the exact same content. Read that again. Same face, same voice, same words. Live versus recorded. Completely different learning outcome. This was documented in research led by developmental psychologist Georgine Trosseth and colleagues studying what they call the video deficit effect, the well-established finding that infants and toddlers learn significantly less from screens than from equivalent live interactions. But the video deficit largely disappears when the screen interaction is contingent, when someone on the other end actually responds to the baby, when the baby looks away and the person on screen says their name, when the interaction is real. What this tells us is that the infant brain isn't responding to the pixels. It's responding to contingency, to the experience of another mind actually tracking them, responding to them, being with them. That's what learning requires at this age. That's what the developing brain is wired to seek. This is why video calls with family members don't fall under the same concern as passive screen exposure. The baby isn't just watching a screen. They're in a social interaction that happens to be mediated by technology. The neuroscience of early social learning doesn't care about the medium. It cares about whether another person is genuinely responding. And this finding should do something else for you. It should reframe how you think about co-viewing. Sitting with your toddler while they watch something, commenting on it, asking questions, making it interactive. You are partially recreating that contingency. You are the responsive mind in the room. That changes the experience. The research on this is still developing, but the direction it points is consistent. Presence and responsiveness are the variables that matter, not the screen itself. If what we've covered so far is landing differently than what you usually see, that's exactly what this channel exists for. The research isn't always comfortable, and it's rarely as simple as a headline. If you're the kind of parent who wants to actually understand the science behind the choices you're making every day, hitting subscribe takes 1 second. And what's coming next? The section on what the research says parents should genuinely worry about. That's the part most accounts skip entirely, because it's not about screens at all. Here is the finding that almost no parenting influencer will share with you, because it makes the conversation uncomfortably personal. The research on screen time and infant development has increasingly pointed to parental phone use, not the baby's screen time, as a more significant variable in early social and emotional development. Studies examining caregiver responsiveness have found that when parents are absorbed in their own devices, the quality of face-to-face interaction with their infants drops measurably. The serve and return exchanges, the back and forth that builds neural architecture in the prefrontal cortex and supports language, emotional regulation, and secure attachment. Those exchanges don't happen when a caregiver's attention is elsewhere. This isn't about blame. Every parent checks their phone. The research isn't suggesting otherwise. But it is suggesting that if you're going to audit screen time in your home, the most developmentally significant screen to audit first might be yours. Jenny Radesky's research group at the University of Michigan has studied this directly, observing families in fast food restaurants and documenting how caregiver phone absorption correlates with reduced child-directed speech and increased bids for attention from children. The children in those observations weren't watching screens. They were watching their parents not watch them. The developing brain is exquisitely sensitive to social contingency. It is built to seek the face of a caregiver, to read expressions, to learn from responses. When that signal is intermittently unavailable, not because of neglect, but because of a notification, the brain is getting a different kind of input than it was designed to expect. I know that's uncomfortable. I'm not saying it to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because the research says it, and you deserve to know what the research actually says. How many of you have already had this thought about your own phone use? Be honest. Drop it in the comments. This one matters. The market for educational baby apps is enormous, and the claims made by many of them that they accelerate language development, boost cognitive skills, give babies a head start, are almost entirely unsupported by independent research. This is worth being direct about. The Baby Einstein series was the subject of a class action settlement after the American Academy of Pediatrics and researchers at the University of Washington published findings suggesting the videos did not produce the developmental benefits they advertised. The Federal Trade Commission has taken action against companies making unsubstantiated educational claims for infant media products. The pattern is consistent. The marketing runs years ahead of the evidence. That said, and this is important, the research on interactive apps for toddlers aged 2 and up is more nuanced. Studies examining apps specifically designed around principles of contingent feedback, repetition, and scaffolded learning have found some evidence of skill transfer, particularly for letter recognition and early numeracy, when the apps are used alongside caregiver engagement. The operative phrase is alongside caregiver engagement. The app alone, handed to a 2-year-old, produces far weaker results than the same app used with a parent who points, comments, and connects the on-screen content to real objects in the room. This maps directly back to what we covered earlier. The screen is not the teacher. The caregiver is the teacher. The screen is a tool that can support or undermine that teaching depending entirely on how it's used. So if you're using an app with your toddler and you're sitting with them, talking about what's on the screen, connecting it to their world, you are doing something meaningfully different from what the studies showing harm were actually studying. That distinction is real, and you deserve to know it. So after all of this, the guidelines, the video deficit research, the data on parental phone use, the truth about educational apps, What does the science actually recommend? Not a number, a framework. First, under 12 months, the research most consistently supports minimizing solo passive screen exposure, not because screens are neurologically toxic, but because every minute of passive screen time in infancy is a minute that could be serve and return interaction, physical exploration, or sleep, all of which have robust developmental evidence behind them. Video calls are a genuine exception. Background TV as a constant ambient feature of the home is worth reconsidering. Second, from 12 to 24 months, the evidence supports intentional, co-viewed content over passive solo viewing. If your 14-month-old watches something with you, and you talk about it, point to things, make it interactive, the developmental cost is substantially lower than the raw screen time number suggests. Third, audit your own screen behavior before you audit your child's. This is what the research points toward most consistently. A caregiver who is present, responsive, and verbally engaged, even in a home where screens exist, is providing the neurological inputs that development requires. Fourth, ignore the guilt industrial complex. The parenting accounts that post the most alarming screen time content are almost never citing peer-reviewed research. They are citing other parenting accounts. The actual developmental scientists working in this field are far more measured in their conclusions than the content you see in your feed. And fifth, the thing I want you to carry out of this video: the quality of your relationship with your child is the most powerful developmental variable in the room, not the screen, not the app, not the number of minutes. The warmth, responsiveness, and attentiveness of the caregiver. That is what 60 years of developmental science, from John Bowlby's attachment work forward, has returned to again and again. Screens are a context. You are the constant. If this reframed something for you, share this video with a parent who needs to hear it, not because they're doing it wrong, because they deserve the actual research, not the panic. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of parent this channel exists for. Someone who wants to understand the why, not just the rule. We go this deep every week. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And the next section is where everything we've covered lands in one place. The screen was never the enemy. Disconnection was. Now you know the difference. And that changes everything about how you show up. Thanks for watching. The end screen has more videos in the same world. Pick whichever video calls to you. They're all built the same way. Real research. No panic.